Through the passing years amidst the rush of life, people have never stopped seeking an answer that seems never fully complete. What is a meaningful life? We live, work, love, and dream, yet sometimes, in those rare silent moments, we feel a quiet emptiness within, as if we are walking without truly knowing where we are heading. Some try to fill that emptiness with success, fame, or material comfort. They hope that once they achieve something great, life will automatically become meaningful. But the more they achieve, the less they feel. Every joy comes and goes like bubbles on water. Every glory eventually fades into the quiet of the night. And when there is no applause, no one watching, they ask themselves, what have I truly lived for? The Buddha once taught that the true meaning of life does not lie in how much we have, but in how we see and live each present moment. A meaningful life is not one praised by others, but one in which we can dwell peacefully in every breath, every action, every thought. It is when we are no longer swept away by desire, no longer driven by fear, and no longer bound by the illusion of a self, which is but a thin veil of smoke before the awakened eye. When the Buddha was still in the world, a young man came and asked him, "Venerable Sir, what must I do to live a life of value?" The Buddha simply smiled and replied, "Learn to see." That answer may seem simple, yet it opens the door to enlightenment. For meaning does not lie in what we possess, but in how we perceive life. The deluded see life as a burden, something to fight against, to overcome, to grasp at every opportunity. The awakened see life as a natural flow, where every moment holds the sacredness of being alive. To live meaningfully, according to Buddhism, is not to do great deeds, but to live deeply in small ones. It is when we drink a cup of tea and taste the essence of the earth and sky, when we walk upon the ground and feel gratitude for every step touching the present moment, when we listen to someone suffering without judgment, simply being there with a full heart. Because meaning does not arise from doing, but from being. When we pause long enough to look deeply into ourselves, we realize that happiness and meaning have never left us, we have only been too busy to notice. Many fear that if they stop their frantic striving, they will become useless, left behind. But in the Buddha's teaching, letting go does not mean passivity. Letting go means to live without attachment, still acting, still contributing, but the mind is not chained to results. When the mind is no longer obsessed with becoming, we truly begin to be. In the modern world, where everything is measured by speed and efficiency, we forget that life is not a race. We were not born to reach a finish line, but to awaken along the way. A meaningful life does not require perfection, it requires mindfulness within each imperfect moment. The Buddha once said, "One who lives mindfully, even for a single day, is more valuable than one who lives 100 years without awareness." This reminds us that the depth of life is not measured by time, but by the quality of our presence. We may live long, but if we live only in worry, fear, and resentment, that life, no matter how long, is empty. Conversely, if a person lives just one day with clarity, compassion, and gratitude, that single day is already eternal. A meaningful life, according to the Buddha's path, is a life awakened amidst the ordinary. It is when we see another's smile and recognize it as our own joy. It is when we can remain silent before anger, understanding that anger is not an enemy but a wounded part asking to be embraced. It is when we can walk through a restless but to return to the wholeness within. The Buddha called this, turning the light inward, directing the light of awareness back to ourselves. When we see the true nature of body and mind, impermanence, non-self, interdependence, we naturally live more lightly, no longer chasing after something beyond this very moment. And that is the miracle, when we no longer search for meaning. Life naturally becomes meaningful. Life, from the Buddhist view, is not a series of days to achieve something, but a living practice. Every experience, joy or sorrow, is an opportunity to understand, to love, to grow in wisdom. Meaning is not the final destination, but the journey unfolding right now. In every breath we are still alive. We often say, I want to live a meaningful life. But in truth, that can only happen when we live authentically, not chasing, not hiding, not running away. When we dare to look deeply into our own darkness, we can touch the light of compassion. When we let go of what is false, we can fully live with what is true. Therefore, to live meaningfully is not to pursue a distant goal, but to awaken ourselves in the present moment. Each time we breathe and know that we are breathing, each time we walk and know that we are walking, that is life, that is meaning, that is the path the Buddha showed more than 2,000 years ago, still perfectly alive today. A meaningful life does not need recognition. It only needs to be lived fully, in stillness and clarity. And from that stillness, the world becomes clearer. People become gentler, and every breath becomes a miracle of being. To live a meaningful life, Buddhism does not invite people to seek the extraordinary, but gently reminds us to return to the very small things that are real. Because it is in the simplicity of the present moment that the entire meaning of life quietly blossoms. Yet, modern people are used to looking far, wanting to reach, wanting to become, and thus rarely recognize the precious thing lying right beneath their feet. The Buddha once said that all human suffering begins when we lose mindfulness, when our mind is no longer present here, but drifts to the past or rushes toward the future. And indeed, most of us live in memories and expectations, rarely in the present moment. We repeat what has passed, regret what has been lost, and fear what has not yet come. In that flow, we gradually lose ourselves. Mindfulness is not tense concentration, but the art of being fully present. When we eat, just eat. When we walk, just walk. When we hear the rain, just listen. In that moment, there is no one trying to do anything, no past or future intruding, only life itself, naturally unfolding. A glass of water, a bird's song, a single breath, all can be gateways to meaning if we are truly present. For when we are fully present, everything becomes alive, and we no longer need to seek anything outside ourselves. A person may reach the highest status, but if in each moment they do not know they are living, that life remains empty. Conversely, someone sweeping leaves in a temple courtyard, if they do it with mindfulness, peace, and gratitude, then every sweep of the broom is a flower blooming in their heart. Mindfulness does not make life less painful, but it helps us see the nature of pain. And when we see clearly, we are no longer enslaved by it. When we look at anger with mindfulness, we see the fear and hurt hidden beneath it. When we look at sadness with mindfulness, we see a heart longing to be loved and understood. That seeing itself is the root of meaning, for only when we understand can we truly love. From that understanding, Buddhism leads us to the second pillar, compassion. If mindfulness helps us see the nature of life, compassion helps us open our hearts to embrace it all. A meaningful life cannot be separated from compassion. Because true meaning does not arise from how much we achieve, but from how we give. Compassion is not pity, but deep empathy with the suffering of ourselves and others. When we can hold our own pain with kindness, we no longer judge or resist. And when we understand that others' suffering also comes from ignorance, fear, and hurt, we no longer want revenge, we only wish to heal. Someone once asked, can compassion change the world? The Buddha taught, you do not need to change the world, only change the way you see it. For the world is never truly evil, it is only that we see it through the lens of ignorance. When compassion is awakened, the world becomes gentler, because we ourselves have become gentler. Compassion begins with knowing how to love ourselves. But it does not stop there. When we understand ourselves deeply enough, we see that the boundary between ourselves and others is but a fragile illusion. The breath we inhale is the breath the trees exhale. The water within us was once the water in the rain. Another's smile is also our own joy. In that truth, compassion is no longer an action, but a natural state of the awakened heart. A compassionate heart does not need to try to love. It only needs to know how to listen, and in that listening, understanding naturally arises. When mindfulness and compassion unite, life becomes a natural flow of understanding and love. But to sustain that flow, Buddhism points to the third pillar, wisdom. Wisdom in Buddhism is not intelligence or knowledge, but seeing things as they truly are, perceiving the impermanence, non-self, and interdependent nature of all phenomena. When we look with wisdom, we no longer cling to what is constantly changing. And only when we can release attachment do we truly become free. All suffering begins with the illusion that there is a separate I, an ego that must be protected, proven, made special. But when wisdom arises, we see that this I is merely a combination of body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, all arising and ceasing moment by moment. There is nothing to cling to, nothing to keep, nothing to lose. And in that seeing, the greatest meaning of life appears, to live without being ruled by the ego, to act without being conditioned by greed, anger, or delusion. When we act with a pure mind, not for self-gain, not for competition, but simply because it is the right thing to do, that action becomes sacred. Wisdom helps us realize that meaning does not lie in results, but in the very act itself. The wise do not ask, "What will I gain?" but rather, "Does this bring peace and awareness to myself and others?" From here, life becomes simple yet profound. We no longer need to chase grand ideals, for every mindful breath, every compassionate act, every understanding gaze is already the expression of a meaningful life. Those who live in wisdom no longer fear death. For they understand that death does not destroy life, it merely transforms its form. Like a wave dissolving into the ocean, it is not lost but returns to the essence of water. To live meaningfully is not to prolong existence, but to live each day as fully as eternity. Mindfulness keeps us in the present. Compassion opens our hearts. Wisdom frees us from illusion. These three elements unite into a life that is deep, gentle, and full of meaning, not because we have achieved something, but because we have truly understood and loved. And then, at some point, when we look back, we will smile and realize meaning is not the final destination, but the very breath passing through us, gentle, pure, and full of life, when people understand the value of mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, they begin to enter a deeper layer of life, where meaning is no longer a concept to think about, but an experience to live. At that depth, awareness becomes the light that illuminates every action, every relationship, and every breath we take. There is no longer a separation between spiritual life and worldly life, because every moment in life can become a practice if we know how to see with the eyes of mindfulness. A person who walks this path does not need to leave the world, nor retreat into forests or caves. They can live in the city, among busy work, yet still maintain a silent space within. That silence is not an escape, but the foundation of clarity. Amidst the noise, a mindful person can still hear the quiet voice of their heart. Amidst pressure and temptation, they can still recognize what is real and what is illusion. We often believe that to live meaningfully is to do something great. But in the light of the Dharma, the greatest thing is to live simply yet wholeheartedly. A mother staying up late caring for her child with love, a worker laboring quietly with gratitude, a farmer plowing his field under the morning sun without complaint, all of them, if fully present in what they do, are living deeply meaningful lives. Such greatness does not need to be recorded in history books. It only needs to be engraved in the consciousness of the one living it, in the serenity they feel each day. For when the mind is no longer dragged away by delusion, every action becomes pure. When we sweep the floor with a quiet mind, we are cleaning not only the dust on the ground but also the dust within. When we wash dishes with mindfulness, we are washing away our own haste and restlessness. And when we face others with compassion, we are healing the world around us. Buddhism teaches that meaning does not lie in what we do, but in how we do it. People are easily caught by results. They want things fast, abundant, and better than others. But the awakened are different. They act in silence, like a flower blooming without needing anyone to notice its fragrance. In every action, if we act with a clear mind, that action becomes a practice. If we speak with love, our words become dharma. If we think with wisdom, our thoughts become the light that guides the way. And when everything in life becomes part of the practice, meaning no longer needs to be sought, it becomes the breath of life itself, as natural as the beating of the heart. Some may ask, if everything is impermanent, if all things will fade away, what is the meaning of life? That question is not wrong, but it only exists when we have not truly understood impermanence. For impermanence is not a reminder of loss, but a doorway to the value of every moment. Because everything changes, each second becomes infinitely precious. A flower that blooms in the morning and withers by evening is cherished precisely because of its fragility. A single breath may seem ordinary, but when we realize it can stop at any moment, we see that life itself is a great miracle. If everything were eternal, what would there be to love or to be grateful for? It is because of impermanence that we learn to treasure. Because of non-self that we learn compassion. And because of interdependence that we understand no one is ever truly separate, every life is woven into the wondrous web of causes and conditions. When we see this clearly, we no longer live for ourselves alone. For the greatest meaning of life is not, I am happy, but, we are at peace. The Buddha once taught, be a light unto yourself. That light is not outside of us, but the light of awareness within. When the mind is bright, the path appears. When the path appears, every step has meaning. We may not be able to change the world, but we can change the way we walk through it. Every mindful step, every understanding word, every compassionate act, together, they make the world lighter, and our hearts clearer. A meaningful life is not built from grand miracles, but nurtured through small, repeated acts of awareness. A smile, a hug, a gentle word, a quiet minute of stillness, if done with mindfulness, they are all expressions of wisdom and love. And then we realize that true meaning is not at the end of the road, but in each step. Not in the future, but in this present moment, where we can love, understand, and live deeply. To live meaningfully does not mean to live without suffering, but to know how to smile at suffering. For in the Dharma, suffering is not the enemy, but a silent teacher. Through suffering, we learn patience, empathy, and inner strength. Without darkness, how could we recognize the light? Without loss, how could we know what is truly precious? When the mind is still enough to look deeply, we see that even in suffering lies the seed of meaning. Those who have suffered can understand the suffering of others, those who have known loneliness can cherish a single touch. Thus, suffering does not diminish the meaning of life, it deepens it. That is why Buddhism does not teach us to run away from suffering, but to walk through it with wisdom and compassion. When we no longer fear pain, it dissolves. When we look deeply into it, we find within it the seed of peace. From there, we learn to live in harmony with impermanence, not resisting, not demanding, but quietly living fully in each passing moment. And in that harmony, we touch the highest level of meaning, inner freedom. A free person is one no longer bound by must have, must achieve, or must be recognized. They no longer need to prove anything, to win over anyone, or to possess anything to feel complete. They simply live, calmly, wholly, and with gratitude. Then, meaning is no longer a goal, but the natural breath of life. Such a person can walk through storms without being swept away, for they have found their true home, the home that exists in every mindful breath, in every grateful heartbeat. Life may still be uncertain, but their mind is steady. The world may change, but they are no longer changed by it. For meaning no longer lies in what they have, but in their very presence. Silent, clear, and compassionate that I in the quiet rhythm of life, there are moments when we suddenly pause and realize how quickly time has passed, how easily days have turned into years. We work. We chase goals, we accumulate possessions, and we strive for success. Yet deep within, there remains a subtle emptiness, an unspoken question that echoes softly, is this all there is to life? Buddhism does not answer that question with promises of heaven or eternal reward. Instead, it gently guides us back to this very moment, to the life we are already living, to the breath we are already taking. It invites us to look deeply into the heart of existence and to discover a meaning that does not depend on external achievements, but on the quality of our awareness. To live meaningfully, in the Buddhist sense, is not to chase after grand purposes or extraordinary missions. It is to awaken, to see clearly the interconnection of all things, to understand that our life is not separate from the lives around us. Every word we speak, every action we take, every thought we nurture ripples outward into the vast web of existence. Meaning arises naturally when we live in harmony with this truth. When we awaken to the impermanent nature of life, something profound shifts inside us. We no longer cling to possessions, status, or recognition as if they could define who we are. We begin to appreciate the simple beauty of each passing moment, the sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of sunlight, the kindness in a stranger's smile. These small, fleeting experiences become sacred, for we see them as they truly are, fragile, precious, and alive. Living meaningfully means embracing the fullness of both joy and sorrow. It is to open our hearts wide enough to hold the pain of the world without being destroyed by it. The Buddha taught that suffering is not an enemy to be defeated but a teacher to be understood. Through mindfulness, we learn to observe our pain with compassion, to listen to it without fear, and in doing so, we transform it into wisdom. A meaningful life is also a life of compassion. When we see through the illusion of separation, we naturally feel the suffering of others as our own. We begin to act not from duty or guilt, but from genuine care. Helping others, offering a kind word, or simply being present for someone in need, these are not small acts. In Buddhism, even a single gesture of kindness can echo through lifetimes. But perhaps the deepest meaning lies in learning to live without clinging. The more we try to control life, the more it slips through our fingers. When we release our tight grip on outcomes, on expectations, on identities, we discover a freedom beyond measure. Life flows as it is meant to, and we move with it effortlessly, like a leaf carried by a gentle stream. To live a meaningful life, then, is to live with awareness, to be awake in each breath, each step, each thought. It is not found in what we achieve but in how we are present. The Buddha's path invites us to return home to ourselves, again and again, until we realize that everything we have been searching for was never lost. If these reflections resonate with you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice may be the light that guides another soul on their journey. And if you wish to walk further on this path of insight and peace, remember to subscribe to the channel, so that together, we may continue exploring the timeless wisdom of the Buddha and rediscover what it truly means to live a meaningful life.